Look, it's RB551. No wonder he got blasted. He's one of those older models programmed by a central computer. Not us. We're independent thinkers. Roger, 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 roger.
I can't let it slide.
Hello, my name is Chanel, and I'd like to welcome you to StandPoint, a podcast that's for the streets, by the streets. Today, we will explore the emergent Defund the Police movement, what that means, and the subsequent policy implications. I'd like to introduce you to today's panel. We have Dr. Anthony Gunter, Dr. Michael Wood Jr., Dr. Adam Ellis, and Sokna Dior, singer, songwriter, community advocate, and graduate of International Development Studies at York University. Welcome to StandPoint. Let's get started. Dr. Wood, what does defund the police mean to you?
Ooh, he's just throwing me right in it. That is okay. So I'm going to try and couch my answer with the most subtle niceties I can. But I think overall, the defund, when I hear that, what I'm seeing is a bunch of disconjointed ideas that people may have with the best interests, but don't really understand the operations of government policy and policing itself. To think that something so simple as defund or even abolish is something that, if not clearly and written down, defined with a leader, is really going to mean something different to everybody else. It's essentially like gender at this point in time. It's whatever you mean it.
Dr. Anthony, your take?
Well, first off, I think from the UK perspective, the defund the police agenda is kind of, a lot of people have taken it on. Either the people on the right have taken it to say these are just left-wing nutters or black radicals, and then people on the left have jumped on it and said, yeah, let's defund the police. There's a big problem, though, in that the defund the police agenda stems from a US particular funding context. We don't have the same funding context. So if we say defund the police, for the last 10 years, actually our police force was defunded in terms of, not defunded, but we had austerity. So we had a lot of funding cuts for all our services. And the police were also one of those services that saw their numbers drop considerably, as well as key social services. So for us, defund the police, I think, is the wrong word. What I think we should be looking at is actually, how do we, what's our police about? What's it for? Is it fit for purpose? And also, are we funding our key services sufficiently?
Okay. Dr. Adam?
So, for me, defund the police, so I come from a position of abolitionist. I believe the police institution itself was created through colonialism for a colonial purpose. And I believe that the laws follow that. So I understand there's kind of like a misinterpretation of the hashtag defund the police was supposed to mean. But I think it's an emotional perspective of people who've been harmed by a colonial system, specifically the apparatus of policing being an arm of that. And I think we need to rethink what the institution of policing is supposed to be and who should be a part of that, right? I've had lived experience in the streets and around bore witness to what the police did to our communities. And I've seen the police kidnap kids. I've seen police harass and intimidate. I've seen police come into the community and do all kinds of horrible things, plant evidence on people, and take away our brothers and sisters from our community. So I think defund the police is really, for me, it's a symbol, it's a stance, it's a call to action to say that, why are the police 10 feet away from my house, and what is their purpose in the community? And does that look different than somewhere such as like Regent Park or Jane and Finch in Toronto versus some middle class and upper class community? So For me, it's a call to action, a hashtag that started, but it's definitely something that brings us together to push back and to say, does this institution even belong in our community?
Okay. And so, Dior?
Like Adam, I agree that defund the police, it's a start of a conversation. It does evoke a lot of emotion, but I do think that it's the start of a conversation that, for me, it extends into the abolition of the police. And I do think it extends into looking at the police as an institution of colonialism. And I do think we have to look at it in terms of a bigger picture. And we have to think big in how we want to think of our society, and looking at a long-term solution to decolonization and creating safer spaces and creating other solutions to the ills of our society and violence and other ways of dealing with members of society who need help, and society as a whole that don't involve violence being inflicted on our most vulnerable members. And I think the police in and of itself, they are dealing with mental health issues as well. And I think that defunding the police is a good start of the conversation, but I think that eventually we do need to move towards abolishing the police. And I don't think that that has to be a negative conversation.
And if I could just pitch something to Michael, maybe provide some context to what is the role of the police in our communities? Because I think, when for civilians, we have one perspective, and maybe for the institution, there's another perspective. Maybe that can contextualize where we go.
Well, let's be clear, Adam. I always have a lot to say, so we can go in every direction you want to go with this. And sure, I guess we can say I'm coming from a bit of a police perspective, but I do want to say it's important that I try to stand back and not just be a cop or be a partisan or anything like that. I'm very strictly settled in the sciences as hard as I can make them. But I don't want to say this is as a cop, but I'm having problems hearing basic ideas like defunding and abolishment at the same time, when I will agree that abolishment is the goal. So if as police we are fighting crime, eventually there will be no crime and we shouldn't have something to fight. So that should be any activist's goal. Anyone that has a real goal should be to eliminate their entire purpose. But what if the goal of abolishment requires a lot more funding and a lot more investment and to get us to that point to cut it off, like not investing all the way, like being status quo can be something that makes us continue to maintain the balance, and to take that away will actually set us back. And I would have to say that if you look at Minneapolis, if you look at Portland, if you look at New York City, Seattle, a lot of these major cities right now that have been focusing on defunding, crime has not, let's not even say crime, violence has not escalated like this in a very long time. So this looks like police failure, and this is another example of where police and the actual causations of crime aren't connected at all, where we have all of this crime rising in America, and yet our answer is to stop the thing that's been keeping a lid on it. And I will agree that policing doesn't improve situations, but it does keep a lid on it. And I'm really uncomfortable with the idea of saying, just because colonialism is involved, that it's wrong. The areas with the best poverty, the highest classes of poverty in the entire world are areas that have been colonized. All of my Mexican neighbors do not want to give up their colonization from Spain. Just because something is colonized just does not mean it's bad. As a cop, I can say one thing for sure. The people that I was serving in Baltimore and the 911 calls that were being given to me were all by Black, poor Americans. They were not by white and upper class people living out in the counties or somewhere else. These were the people that most leftist or ideas coming from the left. These are the people we're supposed to be helping, and they're the ones that are calling for police and for more police, because police respond to violence. And the people who are in the proximity to violence, the last thing they want is less cops. Defund really, from my perspective, is coming from the elites, and it's coming from the upper class. This is not coming from the victimization class. The fear and the people care about feeling safe, and it's not even that people care about being actually safe. We can come in here and present them with the world's full of data about things that would actually make them safe, and they don't care. They just want to feel safe. The perception of the safety overrules everything else. And for the majority of people, being able to call the police, have them right there, and have them execute violence on their behalf, this is not... Like, the state is not some ambiguous thing when it comes to policing. The people that are telling me what to do, how to do my job, and to execute violence on their behalf are standing right there in front of me, asking me to do it, and writing policies and laws telling me to do it. I've got nothing to do with any of this stuff as a servant. What else was I saying? Oh, and worldwide, policing is clearly something that the entire world has decided is something they need, and it is a very similar form of policing at this point in time from everywhere else. So it's not like policing in England. I know we can have funding issues. I know we can have some subtleties, but really the difference between policing in England is not much from the policing in Baltimore, and is not much from the policing in Australia or India. We are all internationally looking at the same best practices, the same type of policies to reduce crime and violence. And sure, there's corruption, there's other influence, but the core is something that's universally essentially agreed in the entire world.
Okay. I mean, I want to jump in here, and I think
yeah.
this is why we've got a major problem, because on the one hand you've got, you Adam and Sockner saying about abolitionism and your average person is thinking, what are they on about? Because these are kind of like, these are lovely things you learn in sociology class, where you go through socialism, then you get to communism, then you get to anarchism, and then we don't need any order because we order ourselves. I mean, that's great in a theoretical perspective, but in reality, the police are there, and they're there because, as you said, of colonialism. I would take issue with what Michael's saying about policing in Toronto or America, but in UK, your average British cop would take a major offence to compare their policing in London to the Baltimore policing. I mean, we've got our problems, but I'm glad to say we ain't in that state just yet. I mean, we're on that road to get like the American police, but we're nowhere near there yet. And because we don't have guns, we don't shoot to kill. Our policing was set up on this idea of minimal force, policing with consent of the community. Where that's breaking down now is where we're having conversations about what is policing for. And there is not, and Adam, you asked Michael a question, what is policing for? The big problem you have is that no one really knows what the police is for. So if you ask police officers, police managers, politicians, they all have a different perspective. Is it a service? Is it a force? Is it to stop crime? Is it to lock people up when they commit a crime? Is it to come in hard? There's a lot of confusion about what we want our police force, and there's a bit of tension between those of us who are saying, well, there's mental health issues here, there's substance misuse issues, there's child abuse and all that kind of stuff. We want the police to have a role in that, how they deal with rape and sexual crime. And then, of course, we want them to deal with these violent, gangbangers, whatever you want to call it, that Michael's on about. So there is a big problem about what we want our police to be for. So let's forget about the idea of abolitionism, and they're here, and we can get into a discussion as to should they be here. No, I don't think they should. Should we have police forces around the world? No, I don't think we should. But the way the world is set up with capitalism, inequality, exploitation, what the police basically do is ensure that the haves continue to have at the expense of the have-nots. And most laws and the police were set up to ensure that the properties and possessions of the rich stay in the possession of the rich, and to make sure that the poor people don't do that. So that is a fundamental issue with policing. It props up an unjust, unfair, world colonial capitalist system. But we're not going to have it overthrow anytime soon. So that's a conversation we can have down the road. What we should be having now is we do have a police issue. We do have issues in our communities around violence and crime. How do we want that to be managed and policed? And it's about a partnership with the community and the police. At the moment, that's not happening.
But Anthony, I think we've been tricked, and this is why I think we've been tricked. So the reason I head towards an abolitionist perspective, and I'm fine to go down the reform route, but I understand the emotions that come with the abolitionist perspective, is because I don't know if somebody can answer this on the panel, but how much of policing is used for terrorism versus how much policing is used for street crime, right? So how much of that police budget, how much of that resources is actually being used to target like these horrendous criminal acts in society, such as terrorism or child abuse, etc., versus what's happening, the resources that are being used to go after communities in the street, right? And I think this is why people get their backs up, because in Toronto, we have like something like a $1.5 billion budget where the police go buy these big armored vehicles and they do all these things, but they're not going to get Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden's dead. They're coming into our communities and doing raids and kicking down doors and taking away people's fathers and doing all this crap. It's BS. And if that's what policing is wrapped up, then I don't think people would want that. And I do hear the community say the same thing. Anytime there's gun violence, the community is like, yeah, we need more policing, blah, blah, blah. But I think they go down a path just out of that insecurity. But in reality, in deeper conversations, they have an understanding that there's an inequity that's happening in the community with the policing coming in and creating a system of fear, and then they justify that, and then they take away all of our brothers and sisters. And I think that's where people just get pissed off. And I don't see why a policing system needs to exist to accomplish that goal. To have order in the community, there's no reason for people to come in the community with guns. You don't need that. So if you don't need that, then isn't that abolition? What are we replacing it with? So
that's not you're getting. To me, that's the confusion, isn't it? That's not abolition, because your average person who's suffering from violence and crime, your average person thinks, "Oh my God, there's no police." And all of us, if we have a problem, the first thing we're going to do is call the police, rightly or wrongly. Mostly rightly. So if we're not talking about abolition, what we're talking about is a new social contract of what do we think the police are for, and we have to agree on that. What are they for? How do they work? And that's not the same as defunding and abolition. It's just not. That's a completely different. They're completely different questions, and you can't have this discussion if you say that, because people are going to go, these people out with the fairies. I'm not having a debate with them. They're not us. See you later. Bye. So there's no discussion to have.
I think we've been tricked into this thinking that it's so pie in the sky to go down the road of even thinking of abolishing the police, and that we can't even direct our policies towards even thinking that way. And I think if we start directing our policies towards that thinking, we could actually get somewhere with our social policies and with our planning in terms of how we respond to issues within our communities. If we actually direct our policies in a way where we are thinking of, okay, maybe if we start responding to crime, and if we start responding to poverty, and if we start responding to issues of violence against women and children and rape and things like that, and addiction, if we start responding to those things in terms of an abolition policy, maybe we'll actually get somewhere. But if we never think towards the ideal, then we'll never actually get there. Right? If we always think of it as a pie in the sky thought, then we'll always be where we always were.
Yes, Michael.
Well, I just wanted to be courteous and raise my hand. I didn't know if it was better that way or not.
He's a police officer.
So I mean, I totally feel where everyone is coming from here. What we were just saying there about abolishment as a goal, let me tell you my experiences. We can have these talks as academics, but I visited over 30 cities, and I've talked to politicians, I've talked to activists everywhere I went. And what I created was this thing called civilian-led policing. And what civilian-led policing is, it's people want to look for a model of policing, but it's actually not a model of policing. It's a framework for an organization that the shareholders, the stakeholders, the people that you're talking about, the community, can actually change and implement new things, change the political structure so they're not going through mayors. They're actually doing what invested community members want to do, leading the police department. That everything is solid, it's backed by peer review, it's backed by best practices of businesses. I've never had a single scholar in the world argue with me about it, but in every single city I presented it to and people I talked to, they were definitely afraid of the direct responsibility that comes from what you're saying. Because the moment that you decide to step back on something, and that father that you were going to put in jail seems really bad. We know that the harm it does to society. We know that creating more fatherless homes in Baltimore isn't a pathway to helping. But when the citizens in the community see that father had just killed 3 other fathers, well, they just don't care, and they want that person out of there. And the idea that those 3 bodies would really fall on them if they didn't use state violence to get the original person they were going after, their fear of what would happen or what will inevitably will happen. So in Portland right now, with all these activists inadvisably, that's not even probably a word, going and defunding the police on their own and making these changes on their own have resulted in an 800% increase in homicide. That is 8 times more minority, black bodies, however you want to put it, that are getting buried by this idea, not that are getting saved. It's just so delicate that the elites have to run it, and who the hell are we to determine what the people should want? It's big.
But it's not about tomorrow. It's not about abolishing the police tomorrow. It's about a long-term investment. It's always easier the police are a short-term solution. It's always easier to pick up the phone, call the police, and throw an addict in jail, or throw a father who is abusing the kids or, slapping around the mom in jail. It's always easier to just do that than to look at the causes of violence and the causes of poverty and to attack those issues. And we don't want to do those things because those are long-term solutions and they're complex. And those are the things that would eventually lead to possibly abolishing the police down the line.
Absolutely.
Okay. See that now that's a different question, isn't it? That's a different question. So we're not actually talking about abolishing the police. We're talking about investing in our society, in our world, that the police are not needed anymore. That's a completely different way of looking at it, as opposed to say abolishing. Because
absolutely,
I think it's the language that just evokes these emotional responses from people, and I think that regardless of what the terminology we use, it's the groups that put forward the terminology, whether it's Black Lives Matter or defund the police. Sure. It's the groups that put forward these terminologies that evoke these emotional responses. So it doesn't matter what we called it. It was going to evoke an emotional response from the other side.
Sure. What do you think? I mean, going along that pathway, what do you think about changing as a concept that police fight the causes of crime versus how the crime committed? This is one of the big cruxes of mine, so that's why I'm going to sit here and be like, yeah, you go, because you're going right up along my line. My main focus is that policing, the number one correlate to violence is environmental poisoning, highlighted by lead poisoning. The second is inequality of resource access. The third is local instabilities, which you see happening a lot in America right now, like fatherless homes and things like that. And the fourth is the police themselves. So 1 in 17 homicides in America are committed by the police. So if you look at if you change the police to be something that fights the causes of crime, as to fight lead poisoning versus the people who are victims of lead poisoning, when the majority of violence occurs in inner cities by people who are lead poisoned, well, then you're sitting there and you're literally talking about a double victimization of that person. They were initially poisoned as a child, and then the effects of that as they got older led them to be in a prison cell again. So if we sit here and we focus on what actually causes crime, the things that we know are correlated to it, then police can fight that, and that's not fighting people. But as long as we're fighting how a crime occurred and like where a crime occurred, so if you talk about a bank robbery, the cops come in all around the world. They investigate who did it and how they did it and how long they're going to put them in the prison. Nobody in the entire world ever stops to investigate how the crime occurred. Or like why the crime occurred, I mean.
And I agree with that, but then the situation becomes, is the human resources available within the police? Do they have the capacity to actually walk backwards through these issues and look at the causation of crime?
Yeah, man, when you got 52% of Baltimore's budget as your line item, you got the money.
Well, that's why we need to defund police and redirect those resources to places where they can.
What I'm saying is, even if you moved that $1.5 billion and shifted it to work on the causes of crime, you still don't have the human beings within the police department who are trained, have the skills, or who are educated enough to actually fix these things. Right?
I don't think they need it. I don't think soldiers need that. Soldiers just need a few leaders to tell them what to do.
No, the average police officer in America has a high school education. Canada is probably an undergrad because
the average cop and the average human are both boxes of rocks. Yeah.
Right. So if you're trying to fix those causes of crime, so anti-Black racism and all these other things, poverty, like these huge things no other human being has wrapped their head around, how are we leaving that to police?
I think one of the things, we jumped straight into this defunding the police debate, and because as Black lives have focused on the inequalities and injustices quite rightly, and the way that police are funded in the US, which is we know is wrong. So definitely we can support that. But what we need to look at is our notion of crime, and the reason why our policing is bloated and not fit for purpose is not because of the police themselves. It's because of what they're supposedly serving or supposedly wiping out. The notion of crime is a nonsense, it's a fallacy, and it's been created over the past 50, 60 years as our public services have been decimated in the West. What they've done is they've created a system where you've got prisons been built to put people in, you've got a prison industrial complex, and the police are another arm of that. So there's a whole industry around crime. And then of course, Adam, you will know that we're talking about, you've got criminology departments. So crime pays. It pays for various reasons. And so I think the police are a symptom of that. And I think we need to get to the cause of what is driving this bloated crime industry that's spreading across academia, policy, government, arms manufacturers, the prisons. We need to look at why we're criminalizing so many people in our society, and they tend to be the poor people. That to me is a core question.
So I had this conversation with you a couple of days ago. We were thinking through some stuff, and I said, how do I have a whole community of people that I grew up with? Every single person went to jail or was on probation or was on parole. The whole community, mostly boys, right? So something is inherently wrong with the policing industrial complex, whatever you want to call it.
Oh, that is a leap, Adam, to blame your behavior on the police complex.
Well, I would say that I've witnessed through my life that young boys, and especially young minority boys, hanging on a corner, not selling drugs, were still policed the same way that other people who were selling drugs, right? And the way the police move out here is they play a game, and the game is constructed to get as many of these young bodies into the criminal justice system. Now, I don't know if that's the intent of the police officer when they sign up, but I know that's the intent of the police institution itself.
Sure.
Because many of us have witnessed this, right? You get placed on probation. There's police officers sitting in an unmarked car around the corner waiting so that you step off the sidewalk so they can rearrest you on an administrative charge, right? This is BS. This is not what police... I do not feel protected and I do not feel secure in my community when shit like that happens. And so we go back... I'm just going back to this original conversation about security. How many people growing up in Regent Park or in Baltimore in a community, how many of these young people or even their parents actually feel secure in their community? And I think the police have a lot to do with creating insecurity when they play these games with the community.
Yeah, man, I'm not going to object to that at all. It's just that why the police are going after you is not a mystery. The police are going after you because your community wrote laws, then employed police officers, and then judged them upon the amount of people that they put in the prison. The primary metric for any cop around the country is going to be what cases did you build and who did you arrest and how many of those people did you do, how solid were those cases. That's going to be what your metric is. And the idea that police are creating all of this on their own, sure, there's some disconnect. In America, the idea of having the mayor be in charge of a police department, somebody that only has 4-year goals, this is one of my big objections. Lead poisoning is a 20-year goal. So obviously, as we mentioned earlier, that's not going to align very well. But it's the flat out fact is the mechanism is not broken for political change. Your community is demanding police officers do this.
So, go ahead, Anthony.
No, I think I don't think. Look, I don't think that the communities are demanding it. I think there's a whole structure and a whole way that the media says you've got a problem with these people for whatever reason, and therefore politicians come in with their 4 or 5 year cycles. We're going to get these people. Then, of course, you join the police force. They're going to say you've got your targets. You need to focus on them, and so it goes around and round and round and round and round. But we do need to look at what is creating these fault levels. Because so if we just focus on the police, I think we're missing the point. We're missing the point because it is true. They do a job and they're in there to do a job. And all of us, when we get jobs, we're given targets. So if the target's wrong, then we need to say it's wrong. But who's setting those targets? Yeah. And so the defunding the police, abolishing the police, is not getting at that. Because if we've got other issues in our society that we really are concerned about, but people in the community, Michael is right, people in the community aren't jumping up and down about the things that maybe they should do. They're jumping up and down about the things that the kid, like you, people like kids like you, who've been a nuisance. You are a nuisance, and they're happy to see you arrested. And they're happy to see you scumbags put in prison because they want their kids to be safe. They want their kids to be all right. And you're the one that's going to bully their kids or they're going to send their kids. So, of course, they're going to give the police a green light to do what they're doing until, of course, it's their kid that gets arrested. Then there's a problem. So it goes round and round and round and round. And we need to focus on the bigger picture. How we do that, I don't know. But we need to have these conversations.
I think that there is something to be said about the historical context of minorities and how they feel being over-policed in their communities, or especially within North America. I can't specifically speak for America, but I know that it's a similar situation with the Black and Indigenous communities there, as it is in Canada, where the policing system has been used to constrain, control, and restrain and survey the minorities, specifically Black and Indigenous people, within certain areas to keep them there and to watch them. And there's a lot of distrust, and they feel over-policed in a lot of ways. And As Michael has mentioned, you know, he has a lot of people within those communities calling the police because they also feel under-policed in a lot of areas, as we see with the missing and murdered Indigenous women in Canada.
Good point.
So there's a lot of distrust where historically those communities feel like they have been watched and abused by law enforcement, and they've been over-policed for things like, you know, obviously marijuana is legal in Canada now, but, you know, there's been a disproportionate amount of minorities who have been profiled here. There were many, many reports done, and it's been an issue. And so on the one hand, you have over-policing of things that we feel don't need to be done. And in our eyes, a lot of the times we feel like it's in service of protecting white people's property and their freedom of movement, and it's been at our expense. And under-policing of things that have been harmful to our communities. So it's been very imbalanced in our eyes. So there has developed a big rift and a lot of distrust. And I don't know how that gets repaired unless we start investing in other ways to deal with things. And I don't see how that happens without defunding the major functions of the police and how they've been operating, which is going in and having harmful interactions with the community.
Dr. Michael, go ahead.
Thanks for letting me in there. I'm really impressed by everybody's really good points and understanding of this. Just some things from like my policing specialty that I do want to bring up. All the evidence I've seen and experienced is that disproportionate policing is more of a misunderstanding than a reality. Anything that when we're saying disproportionate based upon demographics. And it is definitely a misnomer that police respond to demographics. Police do not respond to demographics. Police respond to violence, and they execute their duties within the proximity of violence for what they can see. So this makes people like Freddie Gray in Baltimore, who was doing nonviolence and ended up dying at the hands of the police because he was selling drugs. What this ends up doing is making him a double victim. Not only does he have to run around his life afraid of all the violence and all the jump out boys and being robbed, and he also has to worry about the police, of course. But then he's worrying about the police because of what those other people have done. And then the community comes in and says, we're going to put police near proximity of violence. We then tell the police, your work as an employee is being judged by the amount of offenses that you can do. And thus he becomes a victim from the community's decisions, the politicians' decisions, and his very friends and neighbors who are committing the violence that he is just by happenstance is near. Police just do not respond to race. I will outright say race is not real. It is a social construct. It is something that doesn't exist. And mostly when I'm talking about race, the only way I can deal with it is to dismiss it, and that affects people's personal identity. I'm just going to throw you under the bus here. So if you identify as a black woman, both of those things are completely fabricated, non-real things. You are a human being that acts a certain way. And as far as thinking that the police or any other human being sees your individual paradigm as being black or woman and what that means is just wrong. Those definitions mean something different to virtually everyone. So there's no way that the police are on the same page as to what these things are. More importantly, all violence and all crime, that as far as we can document, is interfamiliar. So this is why you have black on black crime, white on white crime, and when you defend those positions, it seems obvious. You're like, yeah, if everybody lives in the same areas, well, then yeah, they're going to do things. but all the indicators are that everything is interfamiliar. A black cop, so to say, will be more violent towards a black suspect. White cops are more violent towards white suspects. And when that gets dragged out to the extreme, you see things like in America, as long as you're looking at policing as responding to violence, mostly it's under 1%, but if you just want to use broad categories, 6% of the American population commits over 50% of the violence, 50% of the homicides. So you should see the police interacting with those people at that rate, but you do not. In America, you are 16 times less likely to be killed by the police if you are black. And that meets all of everything else we know about crime. Crime and violence are interfamiliar. If you have a bunch of white cops in a black city, the odds of a suspect being killed go down dramatically. If you have a bunch of black cops in a white city, the odds of violence police onto a citizen go down dramatically. And the last point is the reason I don't like the defunding idea and the shifting resources to other units. Now, sure, public health and things like that, I think we have some leeway there. But for a majority of topics, the structure in the policing is so settled. We already have employment practices, we have buildings, we have a structure, we have funding in place, and I'm definitely more comfortable with reforming and adapting the police department to be what you want it to be as a community versus building something new. I think building something new is way harder, but that's opinion.
I want to jump in because the first thing I want to say is about the community. These are disenfranchised communities. They don't have any power. They are, things are done to them. So decisions are made not on their behalf, or on their behalf, but not with their consent, if you know what I mean. Because these are the most poorest, disenfranchised people. Now, the issue of race and policing, I can't believe that, Michael, you say race is a construct. It might be a construct, but the reality is, in the American context, it's 500 years in the making. And we cannot separate policing, the policing of black bodies in these urban plantations, because that's what they are, to the policing on the plantations in the South in the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. The same way the overseer would brutalize these bodies to ensure that they did what they were supposed to do for the white massa. Fast forward 500 years, Michael, you as a white suburbanite are in Baltimore, and you are getting these so-called free slaves, but slaves circa 3.0 in the millennia, and you are basically ensuring that there's no more plantation for them to work on because everything's changed now. Digital economy, we've got no purpose for them, so we just keep them in these ghettos to kill each other, sell drugs to one another, and just and you're there as an occupying force to make sure that this funk doesn't creep out into good, decent white society. And then your black colleagues who join you, they become honorary. In South Africa, they call it honorary whites. They're honorary whites. I mean, they're honorary whites.
Brother, I worked in a black city with black police commissioners and black police department. Yeah, I joined them. They didn't join me.
No, but they're part of a system. They're part of a system to uphold white supremacy. And
you are calling thousands of honorably serving black citizens in Baltimore racist, and I'm so uncomfortable with that.
No, they're not racist individuals, but they're part of an institutionalized, structural racist system.
No, they're not. They're the majority.
They are. They buy into a system that disproportionately punishes, brutalizes, murders black bodies. And
then say the same about all of Africa. All of Africa is in your boat and by your judgment. Then.
Yeah, exactly. Colonialism. That's what colonialism is about.
Not believe in systems that can be white supremacists, that are built on white supremacy, Michael?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that whole statement. I apologize.
Do you not believe in systems that can be built on white supremacy?
Yeah, I totally don't believe that white supremacy exists. It is elite supremacy. The idea that O.J. Simpson and LeBron James and Michael Jordan or whoever, the list that goes on and on and on of powerful black people. See, this is how I affected your personal identities by dismissing your genders and your races, and I understand that that's effectual. but that's not what I mean. I'm trying to have an entirely separate discussion. No, the fake category of black people in Baltimore are not contributing to some concept of white supremacy. Elite supremacy, people in power, sure, but when my entire chain of command is black individuals, to think that we're competing towards white supremacy is nonsense. We would be competing towards black supremacy.
But that's a fundamental point of divergence right there. If we can't agree that a system cannot be built on white supremacy, then
we have to agree that white supremacy exists. That's nonsense. It's nonsense to say that white supremacy exists.
So America, as we see today, so you're trying to tell me that America hasn't been the most dominant capitalist, most powerful country in the world over the past 150, 200 years because of slavery, because it had free enslaved Africans. That's
nonsense. That's absolute nonsense.
So we were
400. Stop.
So you're trying to. So Michael, you're a police officer, and I know most police officers only have a high school education. But surely you must understand that America, its riches were built on black bodies.
That's nonsense. That's nonsense. 400,000 slaves were imported into America. 4.5 million were imported to Brazil. By your logic, Brazil should be the most powerful thing that had their profits built off the backs of slaves. America is the only country that shed its sons and daughters in blood to end slavery. I'm sorry, it's a nonsense argument.
But I think what we're trying to say, Michael, is the system of policing itself.
Dude, it's not a race issue. This is not white. You guys are creating a new division that is going to call for more policing and is not about unity. We are one people with one goal.
No, but
if we're one people, why is it then that we have so many black people in prison? Why is it that most black people live in poverty? Why is it that these people couldn't vote more than 50 years ago? So you suddenly think the fact that they couldn't vote for over 50 years ago, suddenly they're suddenly going to be equal now, when you've had 400 years of your basic human rights not being accepted. So now all of a sudden we're all equal. How does that work?
Well, because we don't live in a microcosm. We can look at other areas where this didn't exist. We can look at Jews who went through something worse, and when they excelled out of it, there are reasons.
We had 500 years of slavery. I'm not trying to make equivalence, but 500 years. My forebears were slaves.
Successful black men don't use that excuse to their failures.
I'm a doctor, you're a doctor, Michael, right? But the difference is, right? My forebears were slaves. My forebears, yours weren't. So
you don't know that. You don't know that I'm not Slavic, and I don't know that you weren't a slave catcher.
Me?
Not a single white person went to Africa and caught slaves. You did that. Don't blame me for your actions. Nobody from America, and you don't know that I'm not Slavic, you don't know that I'm not Jewish, you don't know, and I don't know that you weren't one of the evil Africans that were catching and selling your own people.
But basically, for a system of white...
Dude, America bought something, you sold it, you got the profits.
So, if you cannot accept white supremacy, which is...
No, if you can't accept that we're all one people, under Martin Luther King's dream, one people working towards one goal, and if you want to know why this animosity exists, why this thing still exists, is because you're sowing these ideas right now in people's heads who are going to listen to this and think you're right. I have a harder struggle because I'm black, and it's not true.
Wow. Well, where do you go with that? If you can't, Adam, if you can't accept, listen, there's no conversation to be had. If you cannot accept white supremacy, then you
as
can't.
What, a concept? Sure, it's a concept. It's a concept no more than black supremacy. How is it not more supreme to catch people and sell them on the slave market? You're saying that the person who goes into Wendy's and buys a hamburger is more responsible than the person that created the entire institution.
Well, look, if we do wrong, it's white. The Germans accept, the German state has accepted its role and it's apologized. Most of us, if you do wrong, you accept you've done wrong. To move on, you need to
We
apologize.
fought a war and let our sons and daughters die for it. Get out of here.
Well, I think here in Canada, it's we know that in history, the Northwest Mounted Police were actually established. They were actually established to
So what they were in the past? So what?
Well,
Again, your ancestors were slave catchers who sold slaves. I'm not leaving that burden on you.
Well, I don't think that's a Canadian context. I think that might be an American context. We had slaves moving from the United States coming to Canada, and then we also.
It doesn't matter if the slaves come from Africa. The people who caught and sold slaves are all Africans.
No, I think, but I don't want to get This is an important conversation, but I don't want to get.
You can't have a conversation if you look. This is a bullshit conversation if we don't accept white supremacy. Because this police is bullshit. If you follow the police into bullshit argument, the question really is white supremacy. And how do we overthrow white supremacy?
How is it white supremacy when black countries do the exact same thing? It's so nonsense.
So we can talk about defunding the police and abolitionism, but the police are there to uphold white supremacy. That's what we're talking about.
That's a joke.
That's what we're talking about.
But I just want to make a comment on what Michael said earlier. Like, if you have a whole department
Adam, there's no. Listen, let me tell you straight. There's no conversation. We cannot have a reasoned conversation if you do not accept that white supremacy and policing is about white supremacy. We can't. This is not an intellectual discussion. If you cannot accept that white supremacy is the reason why we're in this position and the reason why the police are there, you cannot tell me. We cannot have an intellectual academic discussion about this. This is the bottom line, bro. This is not. You can have that discussion because maybe you're white.
You're acting like police didn't exist before white people.
You can have that conversation as a white man. I can't have that conversation. That's not a conversation I can have.
But Anthony, you're missing. Just let me finish.
Adam, there's no missing the point. Does white supremacy exist or not?
No, it does. But
and is the police not? Do the police not uphold white supremacy?
They do. But let me finish. The police in Baltimore, if it's all police black, if it's a whole department of black police officer, that doesn't let them off the hook of working for a white supremacist organization. Michael, I think we need to understand that police officers. I always have this debate with police officers, and they get pissed off.
Define white supremacy, guys. Come on. I cannot sit here and have a. Wait, let me finish the conversation, brother.
The majority of the world, where indigenous people have been wiped out, where people have been enslaved, where injustice...
Non-white people are still the majority. What are you talking about? Whites are the minority.
Can dominate the global majority. That's where you've got white North America, Canada, Europe dominate the rest of the world. That's white supremacy.
No, having a light skin color and developing a better economic and governmental system is not supremacy. That has anything to do with what you're saying.
Yeah, because you're the master race. So you're right. Hitler would call you the master race.
No, you would call me the master race. I'm shedding it and I'm calling myself equal. You're just literally a racist and you don't understand it.
I'm a racist.
Yeah, yes.
So Michael,
you are judging people by the color of their skin and classifying them. You're judging people by the color of their skin and you're categorizing them based upon this and not treating them as individuals. That is the pure textbook definition of a racist.
I didn't create racism.
Is there?
Yeah, you did, because your people captured and sold their people to the rest of the world.
I don't mention your people, but you're saying my people. I don't talk about
the term black, because I'm going by your paradigm. The term.
I haven't said white. I haven't said your people. I said a system of white supremacy. Never at one point.
You can't call me white and call it white supremacy and act like those things are intellectually disconnected. Come on.
No, because there's a system of white supremacists.
Right, to say it's white. It's not white, it's elite, if anything.
Most white people who are not fragile understand that.
You're calling me fragile? Your safety exists because of me.
It's like me saying gender. It's like me saying sexism doesn't exist. And so I'm going to sit here and say I'm a man, and therefore, I don't accept it. I have to accept patriarchy. It's a reality.
Sex is real.
What?
Sex is real. Race is not.
Okay, can I ask a question? Can a black police officer be co-opted into a white racist police department?
Both of your terms are not real.
Okay, so if race is a social construct, right?
It's not an if. Don't say if.
Okay, race is a social construct, right? However, racism still exists. So we have to...
We got an example right here. It's Mr. Anthony Gunter.
Doctor, actually.
But
He's got a PhD.
Speak on behalf of black people, but white people can't erase race. Race still matters. There's been tons of intellectual
It matters to you. It doesn't matter to me. I have thousands of intellectual conversations that can eliminate this false religious ideology.
So when you were policing Baltimore, the people you were policing didn't have a color. They were colorless, were they? They were colorless.
That's how I viewed it. Yeah, I'm a product of the 90s. I grew up under a colorless concept.
You didn't see their color?
No.
Wow. That's deep. That's deep.
So all of my friends are the same way. That's the majority of people. The majority of us aren't racist.
So just because you see different, just because you see different doesn't make you a racist. If you just to acknowledge someone's difference.
If you take people and they don't have a difference, this is a social construct. You are defining their difference and categorizing them based upon something you have constructed.
Honestly,
that
Anthony,
is racism.
He's just better than the rest of us. He's just a better person than the rest of us.
Yeah, that's what you guys are saying. I'm not saying that. Race is not real. If there's anything that's elite and stuff like that, we can say the elites of the educated who think they understand what the people are going through, but they don't. I come from the bottom. You guys are the elitists. Sorry.
It's not. We all understand that race is a social construct. I think we all can agree.
So why are you continuing it,
though?
You're continuing it.
Hold on. Relax. We are having this conversation because we live in reality. And we understand that it's a social construct, and we live in this society in which it is a social construct. And so we have to have this conversation because everybody else in society is operating under this social construct.
No, we're not.
Live, right?
Not you.
Police under this social construct, right?
No, the only time I ever heard racist comments out of cops was from other black cops.
But if you are agreeing and you are putting forward that it is a social construct, you have to police under this social construct. So I do not. Well, then it's not a social construct. Then.
I can treat everyone equally and abide by the law and not factor in race into it. Apparently.
Then it's not a social construct.
Of course it is. You don't have to live in a world where you classify.
If it is, then it exists. No?
No.
Okay, can I just throw something in?
You're admitting that it's a social construct and it is out there in society.
Social constructs are by definition false ideas. People used to believe the world was flat. That was a social construct. You are the type of people that are going around still saying that the world is flat. And it's not.
That's typical racist. That's white racist.
Oh God, stop with that. You people, I'm clearly addressing you two to bring up some 2000s retort. That's pathetic, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
Michael, we are here to debate these ideas because they are out there in society and people are operating under these social constructs, which we are trying to discuss.
You cannot define any of these terms in a way that anyone else will agree with you. Let me give you an example. Man, okay? So man, no two men will even agree on what the definition is. If you can't have definitions, you can't do it.
I went to school and we had these conversations already. So I don't need you to define.
I guess we don't need the audience to hear it then, sure.
So I know that race is a social construct. I don't think anybody here on this panel needs you to tell us that race is a social construct.
I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the audience.
Okay.
Can I throw something in? Michael, just so we have a full understanding. I think we all agree that race is a social construct. However, do you believe
But you can't base anything off of it, Adam, if everyone's definition is different.
Michael, just let me finish. If we all believe that race is a social construct, do you believe that a social construct can be applied by other people in society?
It can be applied by the people who are continuing those ideas. So if you think, for instance, gender, if you think that males and females can only be classified into like women and men, well, then that's a religious ideology that you're putting forth in the world that is not grounded in science or in reality.
No,
the same thing is true.
The way it works is I, as a man who has power, can take the label gender and do whatever the hell I want with it, even though it's a social construct and it's a false thing. I can take it and put meaning to it. So therefore, I can then say
the
women.
Meaning only applies to you. So it doesn't apply. The term is not something another person can understand what you're saying, because this is a totally individualized concept.
It's not. Because
okay, define black then. Adam, right now, define black.
No, but hear my point.
Define black, Adam.
All right, if I take the word black, okay, I'm going to give you an example.
Define black.
I'm going to do it. Just let me do it. Just let me do it. I hold power in society. I have access to the law. I have access to the legal constructs, right? I take blackness, and I wrap it around these ideas. Okay, I'm going to define black. What is it?
You're not
black
defining the term. Define the term.
This is what I'm saying. As a powerful white man in society, I'm going to say black means criminal. Black means thug. Black means gang. Black means this. There's no positive connotation to this word black or blackness. As a white person in society, I put meaning to that word black. So yes, it's a social construct, but it's dangerous when it gets into the hands of fucking bullshit people who do things with it. And what we're saying is, you as a police officer, you might not be the problem, but the whole institution of policing took this construct and put labels on it and put meaning to it. And they did that with indigenous people, and they did that with black people. And that's why you see disproportionality in the criminal justice system. And if it wasn't race and racism, then we wouldn't have governments backpedaling, trying to fix this 100 years later, right?
To say that a black, you just sat there and said shit that to me was mind-blowingly racist. To think that the term black has no positive connotations?
I'm acting as a white, powerful person. That's what I'm saying.
No, you're acting like your idea of that. You don't get to take your ideas, your intents, and put them onto other people. You don't get to do that. You can write it down and you can define it, but again, you did not define black.
No, but I'm giving you an example of what somebody who has...
but my point is we're sitting here and we're saying that we need to define these terms. We need to progress forward. If you're using terms that don't mean anything, and I'm saying, hey, this doesn't mean anything, and then you're not giving me a definition, give me a definition of what is black.
But I just did. I gave you a definition that...
Dude, you think that's a definition that means something? I'm sorry if you think that's aggressive, but your definition was definitely not a definition. What is black?
Well, okay, maybe I won't say it.
So Michael, so if there's no form that you fill in that says your ethnicity.
Every single time my entire life I've checked the box other and wrote human, because it's the human race.
Wow.
I mean, that's scientifically and that's reality. I'm sorry that if you comport to the beliefs of racists from hundreds of years ago, but I do not.
But your colleagues do. Clearly your colleagues do.
No, they do not. You do. And you are not my colleague.
I don't understand why you have such difficulty. America was a nation.
I have a problem because I'm not racist, and I have a person that's expressing racist ideology and putting it out into the world.
But by saying the police departments in the United States or Canada or the UK have a history of racism, I don't understand how that's being racist. That's just us telling the realities of what's happening.
Right. So the people in Africa who caught and sold slaves have a history of racism. They didn't do it to white people. So it doesn't mean anything, Adam.
Wait a minute. No. But Adam, Michael, this is where you're showing your racism. Because if African people did catch fellow Africans, they weren't catching them as black people, and they weren't catching them to put them into slavery. It's like Europeans captured other Europeans.
Of course they were. You're pretending to know that which you do not know.
Let me finish.
Nope.
Right? There's a history of people throughout the world, right? Enslaving each other, capturing each other, right? And you had the people coming to England from the Vikings coming, raping the women, pillaging, and all the rest of it. There's a history of that, right? But you are not saying that your Viking cousins were racist. So why is Africa? So if African, from one tribe,
because I'm explaining your paradigm. This is your logic.
You're making it race. They didn't see race. Race was created when they got to the plantations of America.
No, race was created to justify the slavery of Africans. The term came afterwards to justify the evil.
By who?
And by who? By Americans. Period.
Oh,
and the term got used all over.
So Americans. So you accept that Americans they use the term racism? Yeah.
They used it to justify it.
Slavery.
Yeah, which already existed.
So why is that not the same situation 100 years later or whatever?
Because we don't do it anymore. You are doing it. By you labeling these people as black, you're carrying out their agenda. This is exactly my point. I'm carrying out Martin Luther King's agenda. You're continuing the agenda of the slave catchers. Sorry.
So then how do we understand mass incarceration from your standpoint?
So mass incarceration, violence, again, I just explained. Police respond to violence when 6% of the population commits 50%, 53% of the murders. Yeah, they're going to be 53% of the prison population at minimum.
So are you then saying, so why then do these people commit more than murders? Is it because they're more inherently violent then? That's why they do more?
No, because it has nothing to do with being black. It's not black people that are committing more violence. Black does not exist. People who live in poverty in low-income areas that have lead poisoning. Lead poisoning is the strongest correlate to violence by a mile. People with fatherless homes, when the police are locking them up, sure, that's circular. Police are locking up somebody and then creating the problem by taking them off the streets. All those points we discussed earlier were correct, but these things can all be found in all the data is in objective measurements. It's not in social constructs.
So why are these ghettos okay, you don't see race. But why are these urban ghettos disproportionately black? Why are there not no white ghettos?
Oh, there are white ghettos. I don't know why you would say there aren't white ghettos. That's
so there's no there are no white urban ghettos. There are none.
I worked in 2 of them. What the hell are you talking about? Stop pretending to know that which you do not know.
Okay, so Detroit, Chicago, LA. You're trying to tell me there were white urban ghettos in the cities of America?
Yes.
Okay.
I worked in 2. One's called Pinktown and one's called Hamden in Baltimore.
They're not neighborhoods. We're talking about concentrated neighborhoods of that take up the inner city.
So now we're not a neighborhood until we're a certain size. What amount of people constitutes an area for you?
Okay. Well, let's go back to the 1960s and 70s, where
I don't want to go back to the 1960s and 70s.
Detroit, with the white flight, they left the cities and left. And because the blacks moved in
again, white's not real. It wasn't white flight. It was advantage flight, upper class flight.
Tell that to the U.S. geographer. Is it Doreen Massey who did a lot of work on?
Right. So you want me to continue the American government's positions? Awesome.
But you can't deny 60 years.
So the ultimate white supremacy environment you're claiming is America, and America classifies people and tells them to check on a box whether they're black or white or whatever.
Michael,
and you don't see that you're continuing
You accept lead poisoning, right? You accept lead poisoning in Baltimore. Okay.
I accept facts.
So do you not accept then that in Baltimore, the reason why there's lead poisoning in these minority black neighborhoods is because they wouldn't let these black people live in the white parts of Baltimore, and they forced them to live in the poor bits where there was lead poisoning. Is that not a fact?
True.
And this was government policy legislation.
True.
So was that not white supremacy and racism? To do that?
No, it's the elites.
But why would it not white people?
It's always been the elites. That's always been a misnomer to think it's not the elites.
Okay. But why would not white people? So why were not white people forced into these places to get lead poisoning?
Well, it wasn't because they were white. It was because they were Irish or because they were of European descent.
So why
That's
were
a
not
real
Irish
thing.
why were not Irish people in Baltimore put? Why were the only African Americans that were forced?
There were
to be-
indentured slaves, but not at that time. Because the country took a long time to evolve, and because things... I'm not denying echoes of what happened in the past. What I'm denying is you continuing to be on the loudspeaker and not letting them just be echoes.
Michael, are you familiar with residential schools here in Canada?
Yeah, but I'm also familiar with the fact that all the data says that if a child with good, strong parents has no advantage of where they live or where they go to school, the key element in their success is the parental unit.
So do you think that residential schools has anything to do with white supremacy?
No, for example, people love to throw this out a lot in America, and they're saying, oh, we're not funding the schools enough. But DC and Baltimore are the two highest funded schools, and they have the lowest performance.
Okay, I don't think you understand what residential schools are then.
Go for it.
Residential schools are schools that they sent they kidnapped indigenous children, and they sent...
Yeah, so boarding schools. We did boarding schools here.
So it sounds
We
like...
did boarding schools to Native Americans here.
It sounds like you're taking a position that this was a positive thing. So I thought...
No, I'm saying it's something that happened. It was obviously evil, but it's nothing that I did, and it's nothing that anybody right now bears the responsibility for.
Yeah.
And are you aware that it wasn't that long ago that the last residential school closed in Canada, and it was specifically to strip them of their culture and to
That's fine, but it has nothing to do with race. It has to do with their culture. Are you classifying Indigenous American? What race now are we going to define Indigenous and Native North Americans as?
So you don't find that there's a link to white supremacy in something like that at all?
White supremacy, I don't know what you mean by that. Again, I'm asking you to define the term white supremacy.
Okay, I'm going to define it for you. It's when a white person like, myself, who's even mixed, but
What is a white person?
Right? No, you told me
No,
to
you said
define...
a white person. All right, fine. So what is a white person?
Right. So
I can't let you continue your definition because I don't know what your first term is. What is a white person?
okay. But let me first define white supremacy. So
No,
white
I can't. You can't say a white thing without defining what white is. Define white and define black. I'm still waiting, Adam.
So white supremacy is a power position in society that gives advantage to people who present white or who have a history of whiteness.
So
right?
was O.J. Simpson white supremacy?
I mean, technically, you can go back. We're getting into kind of semantics. So what is white, right? So if you're saying...
These definitions are so grating. Just answer what is black and what is white. The reason you can't answer it...
Understanding, are you?
Look,
no,
you can beat around the bush all you want. Define. How do I know one black person?
You're not here from a position of understanding today, are you?
I understand.
How do I know if someone is black? How?
I understand, right? So if we're saying race is a social construct, therefore, what you're saying is
how
white.
do I understand if someone is black?
Right. But what I'm saying is white can be a social construct, and you can make an argument and put anyone into that category. But what I'm saying is, historically, people who have white complexion have been put into that category and who have been able to take advantage of the power and all these resources in society. That's what it became a bucket. So white is a bucket that you could put anybody into. And if you study race and racism, like if you take a fourth year race and racism course, right? They will tell you that there's whiteness in the middle, and then even other groups in society can gain advantage from that whiteness. So white doesn't have to just be like what I look like on the outside. But
do you seriously think that definition means something?
I think it means something to a lot of people who don't have power in society.
When people hear that definition, all they're going to hear is a word salad. That's all I've heard, and it said nothing. What is white? What is black? Just answer it.
So for me, again, I want to go, okay, take out the
Why
white.
can't we just say, and when I look at somebody, I can tell if they're black because what?
Because your social construct and what you've been taught
Dude,
your whole life
all right.
will tell you that they're black.
All right, you guys continue this conversation without me. I don't have anything valuable to add.
But Michael, just, okay, if we take white out of the supremacy, is there supremacy in society?
Yep.
Okay, so this is where I think you have been going for the last half hour for us to understand that you don't see things in terms of black and white because they're social constructs, but you do see that there's supremacy and a hierarchy in society.
Yeah, there's elite, there's classes. I've said this from the very beginning.
Right, but what I think we're not being sensitive to is how the three people on the panel here today who are black, how they experience.
No, they're not.
Okay. But if they self-identify that way, then that's how
So what? I self-identify as a pineapple. Call me Mr. Pineapple from here on out.
No, but there has been historically white people who self-identify as black, and we have to respect that.
I understand, and they're just as moronic as the person with dark skin identifying as black. You're not black. You're not.
Okay, so we're human.
Unless you can define what it is. If you can define what it is, I am all ears. I'm listening.
I wish you'd have told those police officers that arrested me many years ago when I was a student, when I was a postgrad student, minding my own business, and could have ruined my future career by saying I did something when I didn't. And I was the only black guy there, wasn't doing anything, and they singled me out. I wish you could tell.
Past problems aren't the justification for new ones.
All my experiences in life, I wish I could, walk around and think, well, it's not because I'm black. It's just because I don't know what it is.
I wish you could too. So why don't you change your mentality?
This is what we're dealing with, and this is the problem. And most of your colleagues, and this is the problem, most of your colleagues will not accept.
Yeah, man. Don't classify us in most of our colleagues. If anything, I am an outstanding exception to my colleagues.
Oh, no, I know you're right. I think some of your colleagues who are racist would just say, you know what, I'm a racist, and these black scum are scum.
Yeah, man, you don't have any evidence to call these people racist, and it's a really heavy charge, and I'm not comfortable with it.
No, but we can't say all police officers are racist. I don't think that's what we're saying. I think as a community, we're saying that there's a problem.
I will say they are racist because they work for a racist institution.
You work for a racist institution, and you're spreading racist ideas.
You work for a racist institution, right? Mm-hmm. Your values might not chime with that institution, but your actions are, and what you do leads to the same outcomes.
But can we then argue that all institutions of social control are racist? So the academic institution is racist?
Yeah, well, it is, but the academic institution doesn't have power and control of people's lives. It can't kill people with lethal violence. It can't take away their lives and put them in prison for something they didn't do and end up getting lethal injection. So, there's structural racism, yeah, but we're concerned with structural racism that kills. And there are certain...
so when the majority of judges are black, do you fall back, or do you want them disproportionate? Do you want them proportional? What do you want?
The system is still structurally corrupt and racist. And
but when it's all black... Are you happy then?
I work for university. Doesn't mean to say my university isn't racist, because it is.
Oh man, this is all circular to me. I can't follow it.
But these are complex ideas, and they need to be unpacked.
Because they're not complex. The idea that race isn't real is not complex.
These are not complex ideas. If you're on the streets and your daily reality is, it's not really that deep. It's not that deep, as the kids here would say. It ain't deep. It's real. These are conversations. If I was white, this is a privilege I could have to have this conversation. But when you're
having the conversation now on a panel that's majority minority, what the hell are you talking about?
I can theorize about them. But when I walk out that door, and I'm Freddie Gray, that's not a theory for him. That's
if you're Freddie Gray, you could be the most powerful person in the world. Literally, you're going to sit here and say the president of the United States is the most powerful person in the world, and we just had a black president.
It doesn't matter who you are. We've had MPs, politicians, black judges been arrested, been shot. They're just Freddie Gray. They're not different. No matter what. So your colleagues, even black police officers, have been arrested and charged.
So have white ones. What the hell is your point? point.
So it doesn't matter. They might get a pass into white society, but
There's no evidence of that. Stop saying that. You are pretending to know that which you do not know. There is no evidence of people being black being sent to prison longer because they're black. That is something that you got from NSNBC. That is not in the data.
Well, in Canada, we've done the research, a bit of it, and there is. So how do we explain disproportionality?
I just explained it again. We'll have to keep going back to it. When 6% of the population commits 50% of the murders, you should be at least 50% of the prison population.
But that's not why they went to jail, Michael. They went to jail for.
It doesn't matter. I've also explained this, Adam. Cops respond to violence, and then they enforce laws, and then where they can see, and so anything within the proximity to violence. So when 6% of the population commits 50% of the murders, they victimize everyone around them.
I mean, I would say from what I see here is that you've had a very interesting way of going around the houses. So some of your colleagues would just say, look, these black people, they commit more crime and therefore lock them up. But you're saying it ain't race, it ain't anything like that, but you're still saying the same thing, but you're just being more dishonest. I would say you're dishonest.
More dishonest because I'm giving the factual evidence?
You're dishonest because you're trying to pretend that race doesn't come into it, whereas at least your colleagues will admit race does come into it, and we can work with that. But you can't work with dishonesty. You have to be honest.
How does race come into it? Explain.
So I'll give you an example. My supervisor, when I was doing my dissertation, he did a huge study on racism and policing in Canada. He did it in 2 cities. And what they
How
found...
did he define black in that report, Adam?
Right. Well...
He defined black in some ridiculous way like you did earlier, in a way that your report means nothing. I've been through all this shit. I've been through all the peer reviewed. These things don't say anything. There's this religious bullshit ideology that you're promoting.
Okay, but if there are reports and people have done it through objective
grounded in facts.
Right. If they found that there has been biased policing and there has been over policing and there has
bias towards what? Demographics? Again, I've explained, yes, policing is biased towards demographics because you guys have created this idea of race and started classifying people into it and aren't looking at reality. Is there crossover between lead poisoning and being black? Yes, because of redlining from the past. Yes, but we don't continue it. You can't be anti-racist and not be racist. It's the same thing.
So here's the question. So you're saying that the police in America target communities because of the so-called crimes that they're engaged in. So if a community is
No, that is not what I said. Don't rephrase what I said. I'm very clear.
Well, I'm trying
police respond to violence and police enforce rules where they can see because the community demands it of them.
Right. So what if we were to say that there's as much violence in the white community as there is in the black community?
You would be lying.
You'd be lying.
So
why would you be lying?
Because we have bodies, we know the amount of homicides. So everything I take.
But you just said you said you don't see black. You've been arguing for about an hour saying you don't see define what black is, but now you're telling me that you can see that there's more black people that are killed than white. So come on, make your mind up.
Yeah, I'm explaining the paradigm of the data as you have seen it. So what I'm saying, when I say black and when I say white, I'm saying going by your paradigm.
Oh, so now you're accepting our paradigm. Okay.
And I'm not accepting it. Man, you should biting my tongue very hard right now. So when you go out and you sit there and you say that it's white or black, going by your paradigm, the victims we have bodies, we know who kills people, we have that data. The rest of the data, crime, is a very ambiguous data point because crime is a measurement of what police do. It's the measurement of someone calling the police and then the police taking a report. It has nothing to do with objective measurements of crime. So we have to push most of measurements of crime aside and look just at violence. So we only have homicides, shootings, and things like that. We will have to infer off of the homicides that we have. But again, going by your paradigm and classifying people as black, 6% of the population commits 53% of the homicides. The 60-some% of the population that you would call white does not kill that many people. That's just not true.
Well, why are you calling it
And I can explain why.
Paradigm when it's your colleagues who are writing these reports? These colleagues
They're not my colleagues.
Who are saying that don't see race.
Well, yeah, Michael's an ex-police officer, so we don't put him with the rest of the
Okay, your ex-colleagues then.
Yeah, but the thing is, because in Baltimore, because a black city with a black commissioner, black bosses, a black president, a black state's attorney general, a black mayor, a black city council told me to check these boxes that they forced me to classify people as.
And you're saying that these people don't see race?
Do the black people in charge of Baltimore see race? Yeah, I think the vast majority of people think that race is real.
But you don't.
No, I can know how to read DNA. I understand science.
But conveniently, you think it's all nonsense, but it's not nonsense when it tells you that black people commit more murders than whites.
No, it is nonsense when it says that. Lead-poisoned people commit more violence. People without fathers, people in resource inequality areas commit more violence. I literally explained this earlier, but you're not hearing me because I've attacked your personal identity.
So what I want to know is, why are not more white people suffering from lead poisoning and all these things that you're talking about?
Right. So while you were talking about the times when the upper classes moved out of the cities, what happened was coincidentally at that same time, PVC was being used to build houses. In 1974, we did the CAFE standards and got the lead out of the air. So in the 90s, we had dramatic crime reduction across the entire United States where everyone is. And that was very universal because the lead was out of the air. When you're talking about local things, so these people moved out of the cities where houses were constructed with copper pipes and lead paint. They moved out into the suburbs where they used PVC pipes and unleaded paint and stopped poisoning their children. Yep.
I know, but it still doesn't answer the question. Why are disproportionate numbers of these people who I call black, why are they disproportionately at the bottom of the pile?
I just explained it.
No,
so
because...
I think from Michael's paradigm,
they weren't in the upper classes. The black people who were in the upper classes left, and you will see a new gray flight that continues as well.
Okay, but it still doesn't answer the question. Why are there not significant numbers of poorer white lower classes who could also...
Well, most of the poor white people live in rural areas that have rural things and don't have lead poisoning because they're out in the middle of the woods.
But I think so. If I take Michael's argument, it's about power, not race.
Absolutely.
There's not an argument. It's not an argument. It's a white supremacist argument. It's not an argument.
Yeah, and I'm not agreeing. I'm just trying to figure.
Yo, if you think I'm the one promoting white supremacy, you're living on another planet.
White supremacist. But you just don't want to say it.
Okay.
You're a white supremacist, bro. It's a fact.
I'm just going to add nothing to that.
You can twist it all you want.
Yeah, there's not a single audience member that's going to believe that line.
You're a white supremacist.
Okay.
It's not okay. It's fact. I'm telling you it is.
You're the white supremacist. That's okay if you want to push it onto me. That's fine. You think white people are better than you. I don't.
I would agree with what Malcolm X says. He has more respect for the Ku Klux Klan because they say what they than people who lie.
Right, so you think I'm a neoliberal?
No. You're basically, to me, the Ku Klux Klan I have more respect for than someone like you who doesn't want to call facts.
Malcolm X was talking about your ideas, not mine. When he said beware of the sheep's and wolves' clothing, he's talking about the liberals that sit there and cater while they're holding black people down the entire time. He's talking about your argument, not mine.
Okay.
So is there a sociological concept that connects?
Adam, there's no bloody sociological concept. It's frigging white supremacy. Don't even try to make some sort of intellectual discussion out of this because it's bull. It's bull. Don't
look at lead poisoning as a reason that humans create violence. Look at race.
Bull. He's a white supremacist with bullshit. There's no arguments to be had. Right? I'll tell it as it is. And this is not a debate because he's a white supremacist. Everything he said, everything he's pointed at. I've had debates with lots of people. right?
Mhm.
But at least they come out and say that all this go around in circles. But basically, you are a white supremacist. And apologies.
Chanel, do you think I'm a white supremacist by what I'm saying right now? Yo, I am seeing you as my intellectual equal, my peer, my fellow human being who I want to build a better society with, hand in hand.
But I think if we deny the things that exist, so in
I'm
Canada,
not denying it existed. What I'm telling you is if you continue social constructs, you're continuing the issue. If you go, and so I'm of the group that says, yeah, gender is another social construct. You are who you want to be. Of course, there's unlimited genders. You act however you want to act. Gender is a silly concept. The person that comes in here and says, no, there's only men and women, that's the problem. That's literally what he's saying. There's only white and black supremacy. There's only these ideas of race, and it's just not true.
but I think in Canada we're having these conversations and they're really like significant. And if you can't have truth,
Yeah, man, people thought whether the earth was round or flat was significant. It wasn't. I don't care that you think they're significant.
Well, you can't have reconciliation without truth. And if you don't start from I think what we're all trying to say is if you don't start from the point of truth, even if there's a historical context.
Man, define truth now. So you won't define white or you won't define black, define truth.
But we can't even have a debate, because if you just came out and said, you black people kill more people, you do this, at least you could even argue with that. But you can't even argue with what you're saying, because you're not even presenting an argument. Because you're saying it doesn't, so you're not even, at least the white supremacists will say, yep, because we're the master race, you people do this, you people do that. That's annoying, and that's difficult. But to deny it even exists, so that there is such a thing as that, it makes it difficult to even.
Yeah, man. I told you the moment I told you that your race wasn't real, and that was when you were going to perceive that as an attack on your personal identity, that you would lose your cool and you would go into a place of defensiveness. I told you that would happen because it's human. These are human reactions.
No, when you told me that my forebears were selling slaves and creating racism, I think that's when that would be more of that.
Fine. I mean, deny history and deny facts all you want. So again, what's the definition of truth?
No, I think we all agree that race is a social construct. It's the fact that we can't sit here and have a conversation with that knowing about the implications of race as a social
construct. But you're sowing into children that this race is a thing that is affecting their lives. And the people that are affecting their lives are the ones that are telling them that race is affecting their lives. You're setting up the paradigm. It's just like with suicide. The more you talk about suicide, the more you increase the suicides that take place. So you can think talking about race being real or race's influence is going to help a situation, but you're literally the problem when you do that.
Well,
I'm sorry if that's offensive.
I would like for you to go and tell the indigenous people here that their race has not played into the fact that their children have been ripped away from them and that their culture has been taken away.
Race isn't real. The idea that they occupy the land that someone else wanted is why that happened.
Race is not real, but the implications of race as a social construct has been very real to them. It has.
I understand that, but because they've been misled, the concept of the earth being flat.
It's not about them being misled. It's about what's been done to them as a result
the people
of
the people who believe the earth was flat had their opportunities limited because of their misinformation.
Okay,
if an indigenous person believes whether that race is a social construct or not, has no bearing on whether somebody else is going to come and take their child away because they're indigenous. If they believe that they're indigenous or not, somebody else is not going to care. The government is not going to care whether they believe they're indigenous or not when they come to take their child away.
Right, and the government doesn't care whether they believe they're white or not. It doesn't matter. The problem is they were on land that someone else wanted. The same thing every other society has done.
But I think you're both.
But they didn't do it to the white people. Do you understand?
Yes, they have. That is such nonsense that you guys believe that type of history.
The Canadian government did not go to the white people's houses and take their white children and.
You got to look outside of Canada. It's not just Canada. This happened to the Slavs. Literally, the word slave comes from Slavic.
But I don't think there's a denial that atrocities have happened to other groups in society. What we're trying to explain is, and please don't interrupt me, I think the initial point was to take the indigenous people's land. That's part of colonization. But to justify the taking of the land, they used race and racism in order to do that, and to develop, I guess, white support for this idea that it was okay to take these children off the land and harm them. And this is where the points need to converge, right? The initial point is taking the land, but using race and racism and these ideas, social Darwinism and these ideas of race to create rhetoric about a group. I can show you excerpts from prime ministers from the 1800s where they
Again, I don't care about the past. What are we doing now?
No, but for these groups, the past matters, because you can't heal from the past unless you look backwards. I know what you're. I know where.
No, that's a nonsense concept. You're talking about human nature in a way that is not true.
The last school closed, sir. It wasn't in the 1800s. I believe it was. What was it, in the 1980s?
Again, I don't care about the 80s either. It's freaking 40 years later, and we're talking about policies.
And then it transitioned.
We need to develop policies for now. Right. So the problem you had in the past, Adam, is that race was being used to justify these actions, and you're literally doing the same goddamn thing now.
I paused.
What I'm telling you is you're doing the same thing. You're saying what these people did in the past was a problem, so we need to do the same thing over again. That's nonsense.
Okay, but what I'm
saying
is, Michael, your community.
Right, you want to continue to teach people that had nothing to do with it.
No, I don't.
Oh, so do you think Japanese people owe us something for Pearl Harbor? Do Japanese people owe us something for Pearl Harbor?
I think you should expand on what you mean by that question.
Japanese owe the Chinese something for what they did over the past 200 years. We know that much.
Yeah, man, if you guys are all focused on retribution and vengeance, this is literally what I explained the community demands of policing to do. To go by your guys' paradigm that you're espousing right now, you will need to use violence and the threat of violence to achieve your goals.
But you brought up community-led policing, and you said if I bring my framework to the community, and this puts the community in a power position, right? Mm-hmm. But I guarantee you, no one from our communities are going to let you into the community if you bring these ideas and are not flexible to look backwards into the past. Because
I don't care. I'm not backpedaling because you're wrong.
Every single community in my city will not let a police officer or somebody who's been privileged to power to come in to preach to them about community-led policing.
Dude, how am I privileged to power? These terms are such nonsense. White, black, privilege. You guys got to define these terms before they mean anything. How am I privileged coming from poverty, coming from, if you ever pay attention, I am not from Europe.
I agree, but what I'm saying is you were you went and did your PhD and you created something possibly great to give power back to the community in the way that communities are policed. But what I'm saying is you can't come to my community and preach this stuff without looking backwards. And
I am looking backwards. I literally explained how redlining contributed to black Americans being clustered in these neighborhoods that had lead poisoning. Yes, but you don't do the exact same thing in reverse to think it makes anything different. You drop the concept, the evil that got you there. Okay. You're espousing the evil that got us here, and I am against the evil that got us here.
But let's say we're all part of the community, right? And we're having a conversation about how do we change how our communities are serviced by the police?
This is one way, living in reality.
Okay.
I think this tells us where we're at, and the reason being is because we started off defunding the police, but fundamentally, it's the people who control the police and control society are white supremacists, and they need to be held account. And until that changes, it's not, that's why the resistance is happening, because they want to just, smoke screen everything, say it doesn't exist, say there's not a problem, we've got the problem, we're the problem. It always turn the victims into the problem. That's what always happens.
What's your data point, man? What is your data point? Why do you think black males are committing 53% of the homicides because of what? I gave you an objective measurement, something grounded in science that has nothing to do with race and judging people. Let me hear yours.
Oh well, let's just say that if you want to talk about statistics and data, we'll talk about the nice atomic bomb that was dropped on Japan in 19.
Y'all won't answer a single question that I ask, will you? Between you and Adam, not one.
Or we can talk about the bombs that are dropped on those Pakistani villages, by your presidents and your armed forces, and go around the world kicking ass, killing people. So if you want to talk about real death counts and killers, I think you need to look closer to home.
Oh, all right.
But moving forward,
there's going to be no forward if you can't define black, you can't define white, you can't define supremacy, you can't define any of these terms that are just word salads. And I'm sorry if you feel like that's aggressive or white fragility, whatever, I don't care what you think it is. But if you can't get on terms and define terms, you're never going anywhere. It's literally the first chapter of anything you need to put in peer reviewed needs to be terms.
Yeah, so, I mean, you asked the question, and where do we go from here? We don't go anywhere. We don't go anywhere because until the white system of supremacy that is sitting in front of us, right, a wolf in a sheep's clothing, talking nice language, it all sounds good on paper, but it's a barrier. It's a barrier to ensure that white supremacy continues in different guises, in different forms, and as long as it continues, we'll still be here talking about the same problem. It needs to be brought down.
What does a world without white supremacy look like to you?
It looks like a fair, just world where the global majority have what's theirs.
Is there any example of this?
The world before 1490, whenever it was, when that idiot said he found the Americas.
We're in the safest, most prosperous time in human history, and you want to go backwards?
For who? Yeah, for you, and the fragile minority. Yeah.
I don't understand what you're saying. The world is better for everyone.
But interestingly, the reason why your fragility is becoming so pronounced is because you've got these brown and yellow people like China and India who are now, and you don't. Did you
just call them yellow people?
Yes, the Chinese people. Yes, but you created it. The red, yellow, brown. Why didn't? But according to you, it's a social construct. But yes, according to these I
created it because I'm white.
The yellow, the brown, and all these people, and the black. But we won't go into that. But the reason why disability is so important now is because the power dynamic of the world is changing. And you, white minority, you WASPs, are seeing your power base shrink as China, as India, and other nations of the world start to grow. And you don't like it. So you're retracting. Your Trumpism and all the rest of you, it's your last hurrah. But the day is over. Done.
Chanel, I am very confident that people like us will march into the future and we will leave this kind of rhetoric behind.
Well, yeah. Well, tell your colleagues who were jumping at the White House in January, whenever it was, that it's not good.
Okay.
So obviously, we're not moving forward because.
Adam, you feel we can move forward?
I don't. I think the conversation is problematic on many levels. I mean, for me, like I said, there can't be reconciliation without truth. And for me, I respect my brothers and sisters in the community and how the brothers and sisters see the issue. It doesn't matter how we define things. Like, I think these are all cop-outs a bit, Michael, to be honest with you. And, it's how the people are feeling.
Adam, are you seriously saying I'm copping out by requesting a definition that you refuse to give?
I think it's a maneuver around the conversation. Like, just because we can't define
something. It's a maneuver to ask for a definition?
Yeah, because definitions.
All right, man.
Michael, not everything needs to be objective. Not everything needs to be statistical.
I'm not asking for an objective. I'm not asking for an objective definition. If your definition is, if I look at somebody in my opinion, they are this, I'm fine with that. But you can't sit here and use words that you refuse to define and act like you're communicating.
Right. But we know for a fact in the city of Toronto that young minority men go to jail disproportionately for non-violent offenses. Disproportionately
to what?
To white people, to white youth.
To demographics, which I have already explained, and if you guys got questions about it, I'm more than welcome to answer it. But I explained to you, police do not respond to demographics.
Right.
Otherwise, 20% of elderly people, the prison population should be 20% kids and 20% elderly people. If you believe that, you're moronic.
Right. But here's the problem, right? For me, homicide in Canada is less than 1%. Like the fact, if we're talking about homicide, it's such a small fraction of all violence, right? And to say
doesn't matter. People respond to what they perceive as fear, not actual fear. We went over that.
I've heard this from academics before. They would say, Adam, just follow the bullets. And I'm like, what do you mean, just follow the bullets? And they're basically saying, well, wherever the bullets land in the black community, right?
I've already objected to that, though, Adam. That is not true. The tests have been clear. The data is clear. People care about the perception of safety, not actual safety. So if you want to talk about actual numbers to people's perceptions, it's irrelevant.
Right, but this is what I'm trying to get across. So if homicide is such a small, minute number, but we have this vast number of other forms of violence, non-lethal forms of violence, let's say. But you're policing my community because you're determining that it's violent, not because of homicide, but because just of even non-lethal violence. But what I'm saying is there's non-lethal violence in the white community, domestic violence, all these other forms of violence, child abuse, etc. But those communities aren't policed because you're not given.
That's just false. That is a statement that you're making that is not supported by evidence and reality. I mean, I've been a cop. You're going to tell me that my neighborhood out here in the suburbs is not policed, that there isn't violence? I mean, I hear gunshots. People come and get locked up. There's no data that's going to support what you're saying.
But there is data. There's qualitative data of individuals explaining that when police come to the black
not unless you do demographics. As soon as you do violence, you will find parallels exactly.
And I agree with you. So this is what I'll agree with you about. If there's a gunshot in the community, the police are responding to the gunshot. I'll agree with you.
No matter the community. No matter the community. And if it goes down in Brent Hills, it's going to be worse.
Yeah, right. So I agree with you to that. But it's what happens when the police get to the community and how they respond, right? So there was a study out here not too long ago of responses to gunshot victims. And they found that responses to gunshot victims in the projects were different than responses outside of that. So,
because of the project or because of the victim?
Right, and this is the conversation that I'm hearing. Is it because of race and racism? Or is it because of class? Or is it because of some other mechanisms, right?
No, literally, it could be something else, like literally the physics and the environmental layout of the projects, considering they're often low rises and they're tight constructed apartment buildings, and there's other known offenders living in the exact area, then yeah, it's going to be different because of your geography and the proximity to violence in other ways, of course. You have to eliminate those variables before you look at race. Race needs to be the last variable you look at.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so help me understand this then. What happened during the war on drugs? Because we were all kind of working the streets in the 90s, right?
Oh, you're bringing up the cocaine disparity, cocaine crack disparity?
No,
we can do that.
I'm bringing up the marijuana disparity. So I'm saying just based on marijuana, right?
I've asked and answered, bro. Police respond to the proximity to violence, and then they can only be, they are tasked to make arrests, and they can only make arrests as far as they can see.
Okay, so in one of the biggest housing projects in Toronto, in Regent Park, I would say there was a 90s group of young black men and other minorities, right, by the police, who were targeting these kids because they were smoking marijuana. Now, marijuana was a criminal charge.
How do you say, where's the claim come that they're targeting the kids for smoking cannabis?
No, but this is what I'm saying. I'm agreeing with part of your argument. That
No, you said they were targeting the kids for smoking cannabis. Where are you getting that from?
It's a bit of, because we can have academic debates and it sounds great, right, and data, but real people's experiences and lives don't relate to academic debates and data. And
yeah, real people's experience are the worst type of evidence in the entire world.
When you've been brutalized, when the police are an occupying force, and they always have been, and I can talk about that from a UK perspective, and I can talk about it from a Caribbean perspective in terms of colonial policing. And we have always been a community that has been over-policed, and I'll say it again, it goes back to colonialism and slavery, and it just changes, the uniform changes, but the behavior and what they're policing doesn't. And I don't care what, you can have Professor saying this, Professor saying that. To me, I find it offensive and I find it annoying, because I don't need to see data, and I don't need any qualitative research to tell me that.
Apparently. So the question is where do you get this position that they were targeting cannabis?
So from my own lived experience in my own community.
No, you said the cops were targeting these kids because of cannabis use. Where did you get that from?
From the police. They said you're under arrest because
So you believe what people tell you? People are truthful?
We're going around in circles.
Why do you keep interrupting, man? I'm talking to Adam.
I find it annoying, and I find it offensive to be denying.
Yeah, so don't interrupt what me and Adam are saying. Just hold on.
Denying people's experiences in existence, and I can't sit here and have any kind of academic
right, man.
debate.
If you've been in a car crash,
people's experience and their humanity.
Anthony, if you were in a car crash, you didn't suddenly get imparted the knowledge of physics and how that went down. Being a victim of trauma makes you a very bad witness and very bad example of getting your thoughts straight. That is just being human. It's not a judgment on anything, and it's not meant to offend anyone. There's a reason. Dude!
Gaslighting, isn't it? Now you're gaslighting my experience, our experience. That's what you're doing. Gaslight. It's called gaslighting.
So Adam, the cops telling you that they were doing it because of cannabis is a very poor piece of evidence to what was truly happening. You agree to that, right?
I would agree. I would say that there's a larger game that was going on in the community, and cannabis was just one way for the police to infiltrate in the community. So
exactly, yes.
But
that's not what you said before. Why are you changing it now? This is my problem.
This is what I've said the whole time. Let me finish. I'm saying the entry point into the community for the police is the fucking joint that I'm holding in my hand.
There's no entry. Right? Look, they don't need an entry point in the community. This is pedantics.
No, this is what happens.
No, it's bullshit. And from day one, right? They see these people, and yes, they use excuses of cannabis, whatever you want to call it. Before that was pimping. We don't. It's just whatever you want to call it. As soon as these people land on the soil, they are over-policing them. They always have. Underprotected, over-policed, as Sutton has alluded to earlier. That has always been the case. And you can talk about your cannabis and give whatever the hell you want to talk about, but the facts are the facts. Doesn't matter what it is, these people are targeted, historically have been targeted, and will continue to be targeted. And let's just move on and shut this down, because this conversation is pointless.
I would still like to listen to you, Adam.
Yeah, you can have a conversation. You can have a conversation. I don't want to be sitting and listening to it. So you can have your conversation in another podcast. I don't want to hear it.
No, right, have a nice day, bro.
The end of the conversation is what I was trying to allude to was, and Anthony's right also, is that the game has already been set up for the community to fail. The police have created this scenario. What I'm saying is when they come to the community, they say,
how did the police create the scenario, man? You guys gotta qualify these claims you're making. We just already had a whole conversation about how the police are really just employees for the community. Right, so how did the police aren't doing something the community isn't asking them to do?
But do you accept the concept of over-policing?
We don't accept the concept of anything. Could we wrap this up? He doesn't. We know he doesn't say anything.
Anthony, please.
Going anywhere.
Please stop.
He's wrapped this up.
Yes, I understand over-policing. I have explained multiple times now why over-policing exists, and somebody like Freddie Gray is an extreme victim.
They respectfully agree to disagree. That's just.
I'm not hearing a lot of respect from you, Anthony.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for trying to get through this topic today, and we'll connect on in another episode on another issue. So
Yeah, well, yeah, we will. Well,
have a good day, everyone.
It should be white supremacist apologists podcast. That's what it should have been, not defund.
Chanel, do you have any last closing things that you would like to kind of clear up or ask or anything? Or
He's traumatized.
Sakna, I don't want to say your name wrong. Shakna, I'm sorry. Either one of you.
Sure. I feel like as kind of on the outside looking in, as someone who isn't in academia, my view on things is I do agree that there needs to be police reform. I do believe that more resources need to be allocated to policing and how policing is done, because I do think that it is flawed in many ways. But I appreciate us having this conversation because I feel like it went into something deeper where there is an issue of race and policing. As Sokna said, I do agree that race is a social construct, but it is something that we need to talk about because it has affected people in many ways. As it was shown here, I feel like me, Sokna, Anthony, our experience of policing, and even Adam, is very different than yours, Michael. And I agree that we do need to move forward, but it's important to understand where we were coming from. I feel like policing, marginalized communities, all of that was built off racism and racist ideologies and systems. And it is important to move forward. But to move forward, we do have to understand that that is where we're coming from. And it has affected a lot of people in the process. So to know where you're going, you need to know where you're coming from. And you need to understand the injustices that people of color felt by the system, by policing and other systems. So do I think we're going to have a solution for policing tomorrow? I don't. But I do think the most important thing for reform or social justice is talking to the people that it affects to evoke change. I don't think you can make change at the top without including the people that it affected. And if you do talk to a lot of people in marginalized community, race played a big role in that. So that is something that needs to be acknowledged when making change and moving forward. So that's kind of my final point, but I do want to give everyone the opportunity to kind of have their final wrap-up point for today. So Adam, do you want to start with your final point?
And I echo your sentiments, and I truly believe that you can't reconcile without having truth. And we have to listen to the community. We have to listen to those who have been affected by this. And if we come to the table with closed ears, we're never gonna get anywhere. And I understand people's positions of not wanting to look backwards and wanting to look forward only, but it's problematic because there's so many layers of harm that have been done. Like, how do we undo 20 years of the war on drugs? How do we undo mass incarceration of 20 years or even 30 years, right? So I think it's important, to have these conversations, and I hope they continue, right?
For sure. Dr. Michael, your last point?
Thank you. I just want to say that I'm not arguing that we don't teach history. What I'm arguing is that drawing arbitrary timelines in a history of a very complicated world that's set up the way it is, that didn't have anything to do with any of us, is a really poor way of going about things. If if all those white people who were victims of the Ottoman Empire continue to go around teaching their children about how evil brown people are and what they went through at the time, then those children would continue to harbor that kind of animosity going forward. If Jews were teaching their children about German supremacy and about how all Germans are contributing towards this place of Nazi supremacy, then it's obvious that Jewish children would be fearful and would think that there's some need of retribution or protection against that German kid that they're going to school with, and it's simply not true. That is a way that we're creating demons in our world and othering people, and I am not interested in othering human beings in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you. Dr. Anthony?
Yeah, it's a very difficult conversation. It's a very difficult, and it is exceptionally complex. But what I find problematic is people don't want to acknowledge, and it's not to live in the past. It's not to poison anyone. It's not to blame anyone. But you do have to look in the mirror, and when you look in the mirror, what you see isn't necessarily nice. But you've got to look in the mirror, and before you can go forward, you have to look in the mirror and accept what's gone on, what is going on now, and you have to be prepared to listen.
What's that called?
And yes, and as a man, many times I've been in a room with women talking about experiences of black women in the academy or black women in society, and as a man, you have to listen, and it's painful you listening, but you have to listen, and in order to move on, that's what you need to do. And people in power find it very difficult to listen. And they're the people who can affect change. Yes, the voices from those who are victims. Yeah, we can agitate for change, and we will eventually make sure change happens. But it can be done violently, or it can be done peaceably. It depends on those who are holding the reins what they want. And if you want peace, you can have it peacefully. But if you want it to be guns and bombs, then that's the way it's got to go. But change has to come. There's no alternative.
Thank you. And Sokna?
I think that we need to, as Adam said, think in terms of truth and reconciliation, which has been a big thing in Canada, especially with the Indigenous people here. We have to reckon with our past, and I do think that includes looking at the colonial systems and how the legacies of that have affected how we operate today. I think that they have continued to persist and affect people's lives and in real ways. And I think that we need to think big and invest in the long term. And it's not going to be an easy task. And it shouldn't be, because it's a complex issue. And for me, I think a lot of the time I try to approach these things with thought in mind to seek to understand before being understood. And I think it takes a lot of empathy, and not just on vulnerable communities, but also for, the police. I think they do require empathy. I think their mental health has been a big component that has been overlooked. And I think that is a key component to bridging the gap, because we also have to kind of look at where they're coming from. And I'm trying to understand where Michael is coming from. I'm trying to listen to where he's coming from. And I'm trying to have empathy for you. And I understand that, the ideal is to not see race. And my ideal is to abolish the police one day. And it's not going to happen tomorrow, but we have to look at the realities of today, and also acknowledging what the realities of the past have meant for us now. And I think that, investing into our futures and having empathy for each other and actually listening to our most vulnerable people will have a real impact. So I hope that we can actually listen to each other. And, Michael, I appreciate you being here and taking some heat. And, I do appreciate you giving your point of view, even though I disagree with a lot of what you said today. I do appreciate you sitting here and being here with us today, because, it's not an easy conversation to have.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank all of you guys, all the panelists, for being here with us today. Dr. Michael, Dr. Anthony, Dr. Adams, Sokna Dior. I know for me, like, the gears were turning listening to you guys, the conversation. And I think that's kind of the point of this whole thing, is to have people listen and think about some of these topics that are happening and how we can evoke change. So I want to thank you for the discussion. Hopefully everyone who listens to this, they can, think about it too. And for everyone who is listening, be sure to listen out for our next episode of the podcast, where we have more interesting conversation, more interesting topics to dissect. That is all that we have for today. Again, this is StandPoint, and I want to thank all you guys for listening and being a part of it.
Good job, Chanel.
Yeah, I'm mute. Anthony, you're on mute.
Oh,
Well done, Chanel. Well done.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, everybody. I'll be in touch individually.
Thank
All right.
you. Okay, bye.
Bye.
I can't let it slide. Nah. Look like we got another one of them. Popping at the mouth or the side of his neck when he pouts. No argument, no rebuttal from. He ain't from my town, I don't know him, so I'm guessing he's a clown like he wanted me to love on him. But you know that ain't my style, yet he still got my name in his mouth, and I ain't running for cover from. A bunch of lambs, how you figure you getting fame from my clout, so let's get this cleared now. I'm cold like an Eastern February, but that hating isn't necessary. You being petty cause you see me rising, becoming legendary, and you talking down like you very scary. Come on, dude. Get on, fool. Typing and writing on a post too. Get a cosign when you wouldn't bust a grape in a fruit fight in the produce section at Whole Foods. I already told you. Since my adolescence, I had to stress that never being less than being excellent is the motto I follow. For throttle, I gotta be some sort of testament. If I strive to do it, be the best at it. So testing this is rather pointless, a pandemonium. My opponent, full of baloney, I'm owning him. He's a phony one, cause I can't allow it. I'm overpowered like Bowser, and your mouth is writing checks with a negative balance. You can't cash that. I don't think it's covered by that Affleck. High side if you want, but you putting on a bad act. I promise you, it ain't worth it. It's more than getting laughed at. You don't want to task that, so back and do oblige. I'm killing it like it's a pesticide. I'm prepared if you get in my way. The endeavor's fine. I never settle, I got the better mind. So if you knocking my grind, I just can't let it slide. I just wanna be who I wanna be. I ain't getting in nobody's way, but if you get in mine, then you're gonna be in a bad place. Nah, don't get me wrong. Please don't misunderstand my tone. I created my own lane, so you ain't got no business being in it. So you should see why I can't let it slide. Nah, I done did a lot just to get by, so I can't let it slide. I escaped the mental shackles, I ain't got patience for these bastards, I can't let it slide. I ain't saying I'll attack you, I'm saying this bigger than rappers. I'm saying that you need to back up, so back up. I'm saying that this will not end in a tie, I can't let it slide. My politics are rather controversial. Who would've thought that? I ain't catching all slack, and I have enemies on my ball sack. I'm thinking insanity's what you call that, and I just get appalled at. I'm blacker than Nina the Samoan. I just want freedom and want all these people left alone. How in the world is that champing you? Laughable, you catch an attitude. Glad that you going mad cause my attributes call me bad and a radical, but that is so irrational. Mathematically, I'm past that degree to these rapper dudes. Had another latitude, and that'll prove you lacking too. You roll with a pack of dudes that last you cause you whacking your raps a poo. You need a faculty that's backing you. Your rapping is not compatible. Battle me and that'll be the day. There'll be a casualty, and that don't mean you have to go away. It don't matter to me. Tactically, I'm leaving nothing left. So you can get a step or you can kick rocks like you work construction on a 10th block. So don't do it, you foolish, if you thinking that I've since stopped. I'm just getting started, so when this drop, get ready. Cause I ain't playing about you, I'm praying that you try to get fly like a pterodactyl. I'm staring at you, you better back up, you're daring to try. Apparently I've earned it all, not just a piece of the pie, so I can't let it slide. I just wanna be who I wanna be. I ain't getting in nobody's way, but if you get in mine, then you're gonna be in a bad place. Nah, don't get me wrong. Please don't misunderstand my tone. created my own lane, so you ain't got no business being in it. So you should see why I can't let it slide.